it will be a dialogue. So look at me,
Between
look at
us.
each other. Yeah, thank you. Every organization committed to reaching net zero must inevitably set a carbon removal strategy for counterbalancing residual emissions. This is essential for meeting their climate targets. My name is Nick Nuttall. I'm going to moderate this session presented to you by the Exponential Roadmap and friends and Rethinking Removals. It's the launch of their Carbon Removals Action Guide for companies. And in this session, we'll hear about how the guide has been developed, and we'll delve into how carbon removals can be integrated into a company's climate strategy. So we're going to go straight into a panel and a discussion. And the panelists we have are Johan Falk. He's the CEO and co-founder of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you.
Gabriella Walker, co-founder at Rethinking Removals. And Stefan Buski, Senior Manager, CCS, that's Carbon Capture and Storage, for those in the know, and Removals as well at the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. Okay, great to meet you all. So Johan, let's go straight to you. Why did the Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Rethinking Removals decide to produce this guide, and what's been the process leading up to this launch?
Thank you, Nick. So science is very clear. We need to halve emissions every decade, but we are still about 5 years behind what is required. But the good sign is that we actually see a tremendous development in terms of climate solutions, and we might be close to bending the curve. But it's not sufficient just to focus on mitigation. At the same time, we need to scale up carbon removals exponentially while protecting nature. And we can't wait to net zero. We should actually start from today. And from our perspective, what we saw as absolutely essential is basically to mobilize the companies to start to invest today. And that is why we developed this guideline together with Rethink Removals, Oxford Net Zero, Race to Zero, WBCST, and we have a number of great partners like VSR, Iceberg Max, Nordic Climate Advisory Group, Women Business Coalition. And a key point is that we can't just wait for the standards. We need to start today. We need straightforward, high integrity guidance where companies can get started immediately. So that is the purpose why we kicked off this particular project.
Good. Gabriel, let's come to you. So Johan just said we have mitigation, but we need to go further. We need to removals. So what are carbon removals so that the average person just gets it, right?
Okay, so what I must say is I'm immensely proud of this moment because I had exactly that conversation with Johan about 2 years ago, sitting on the top of a mountain in Norway in the rain, where with a piece of rock in our hands, drawing out on the soil of the mountain exactly what an exponential scale-up of carbon removals needed to look like, what they were, and how they needed to go alongside reduction.
Do you have a photo of this?
We actually do have a photograph of it.
Oh, it's a shame we don't have it on the show
can't show
right
it,
now.
but it was a legendary moment because that's where we realized that with Exponential Roadmap Initiatives work with companies to say, this is how you should do your net zero, that there was a missing piece, which is carbon removals. And so what are removals? It's basically taking the carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere and keeping it out. The way that you tell if something was a removal is, did it start in the air? And is it not in the air anymore? And are you keeping it out for a substantial amount of time? So carbon removals can span a very wide range of methods from trees. Trees are very excellent carbon capture devices. It still blows my mind that trees make their entire bodies out of thin air and they're great at capturing it. You can also do it in soils. You can store carbon in rocks. You can store it in the ocean. You can grind up rocks and spread them on fields and turn them into carbon sponges. You can suck air through devices that capture the CO2 and you can bury it in geological storage. You can make energy out of wood and capture. There's an entire range, and all of those have been coming into play really strongly in the last 5 years or so.
Okay. And Why is it so important to get companies to actually sort of start doing this, investing in carbon removals?
Yeah. Johan said that one of the reasons we wanted to do this guide is that we needed to start now. We needed companies to start now. And here's why. There's all these inventive ways to do carbon removals. However, those projects need financing in order to scale. And the only way that they can get financing is they have to have proof of a future market. And that's where the companies come in. There's all these different ways that the companies can show, yes, we're engaging in this. One way is an offtake. I promise to buy in the future, and that's a proof of future market. Another way is doing removals in your own operations or in your own value chain. But all these ways are showing that the market is there so that the projects can get the financing so that they can grow at the pace that we need. If we wait and say, I'll buy it when I need it, it won't be there.
Okay. Good. Let's go to Stephen. It is Stephen, yeah?
Yes, it is.
Good. My name is Nicholas, but I'm always known as Nick. So I'm always a bit careful with Stephen or Steve, but that's good. It's Stephen. Okay. So I'm coming round to you on this. Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Rethinking Removals have now launched this guide. And how has the World Business Council on Sustainable Development been involved, and why did you get involved?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having me.
Okay.
It's great to be here. So for context, WBCSD is a not-for-profit based in Switzerland. It focuses on mainly three things, so climate, nature, and equity. And what we have is a vision by 2050 of 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries. And we have a membership base of 250 multinational organizations. They represent 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 24% of global revenues. So big businesses. And if we imagine that they do a fantastic job in decarbonization, there's still 1.5 gigatons per year by 2050 that these member companies will need to neutralize through carbon dioxide removals. Now, we would work with organizations like Exponential Roadmap Initiative to be additive. There's no point when you have a great group of people already working on guidance for companies to do this again. So our role in this was as a reviewer. And if you look through this, in the credits, essentially, it's a stellar team of experts who have been part of this guide. So if you were to build a high-performing sports team in carbon removals, I say that we have this in this guidance. So
you're going to win the Olympics, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or the Commonwealth Games, who knows?
Indeed.
Okay, very interesting indeed. Let's turn back to Gabriella to hear about the contents of the guide. Okay, can you illuminate, in the sense, the key steps outlined in this guidebook, and maybe if you've seen examples of companies following the steps already?
Sure. So one thing I should say is that I'm here with my Rethinking Removals hat on, but we have a sister organization called Curate, which I also co-founded, which is a commercial organization alongside the nonprofit. And I mentioned that because a lot of the insights that we brought into the guide have come from real practical experience. Curate works with many different companies to help them in their removals plan. And so I spent a lot of my time in the rooms with the people who are struggling with these issues. And I think the same with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. This guide has been created out of real issues raised by real companies. And as Stephen said, then went through a very substantial round of review and testing, so that we think this is very practical, it's very pragmatic, it's not prescriptive. We're not saying do these very, very precise things. It's a guidance for how you ought to go about this. So that was with that proviso. There's basically six key steps, and we give quite a lot of guidance within the guide about how to go about them. So step one is integrating removals into your strategy. I talked about this a little bit before. It might be looking for removals and how they can fit into your value chain. It might be that you do them in your operations, or it might be that you look to purchase high integrity credits. But those are the ways in which you want to do that. And you also, in the first step, need to secure your board and finance team's buy-in. It's not enough to have this just in the sustainability division. It has to have internal buy-in. We've learned that over and over again. And the next one is that you calculate, or at least you estimate, your residual emissions, the emissions that you know that you're really unlikely to be able to reduce, so that you know what the size of the removal target is that you're going to need to have to get to. And then when you've done that, you also need to plan the structure of how you get from here to there. So what you're going to need by when in order to build up to that level of residual emissions. So that's setting a removals trajectory. So what have you done? You've integrated it in your strategy, and you've got the internal buy-in. You've then calculated your residual emissions. You now have a trajectory. So the next thing to do is to make a removals portfolio. And in that, we are very emphatic, and this is something that both at Rethinking Removals and Curate, we constantly emphasize. You need a portfolio. You need to spread the costs, you need to spread the risks. Some of these approaches have a very high technology readiness level, but might have different kinds of risks associated with them in terms of risk of reversal. The CO2 might come out again too soon. Others might have a brilliant way of measuring, but they're not quite ready yet. So you need a portfolio, and we recommend that you have at least some credits that have a durability of less than 100 years, some in the 100-year and plus category and some in the 1,000-year plus. And that way, you're spreading your bets, but you're also spreading the influence that you have on helping to build this industry. So once you've done that, you also need to make sure those credits have high quality. And we recommend which are the groups that are working best on this to ensure you're doing it right, notably the ICVCM and Oxford Net Zero. Then, how do you pay for it? So the next step, you've got your portfolio, you figure that out, how do you pay for it? So there are different funding models and different companies already doing this. So you might have an internal carbon price, and you use that to fund it. So that might be one way. You might have fixed budget where you allocate a budget to this. You might be passing it on to your customers in some way. You might be doing all three of those. And if you are doing all three, that's probably one of the most robust ways to go. And finally, once you've got the money, the next thing to do is the accounting. And our recommendation here is separate out what you're doing in reductions and what you're doing in removals, and be completely transparent. As in many things in the climate space, transparency is our friend. If you're transparent about what you're doing, it future-proofs anything you're doing in this space, and it really helps you understand where you are in the process. There you are. And actually, may I just say, there's one more thing I wanted to say, because there's a question about why companies would even do this in the first place. And there's so many that are already acting on this. It used to be just the kind of the tech companies, the Microsofts, but it's now moving into more or less every sector. And they're doing it because they can get access to credits, they can get access to removals, they get better pricing, they can be climate leaders, and they know that they're building the capacity that they're going to need in the future.
And a couple of companies, for example, who are using this strategy?
So there's parts of this strategy that are being used by so many different companies, and we have supporters for this in IKEA, in Apple. But if I were to give a list of the companies that are already engaging with airlines, British Airways is doing parts of this and has been leading the way in airlines. Heineken is doing this, Coca-Cola Hellenic, a whole suite of companies that I could name that are already engaging in different parts.
Right, and so people can learn from them as well how it's going. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, let's go to back to Stephen on this one. Yeah, Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Rethinking Removals have now launched this guide. How have you been involved? Why did you get involved? I think we've covered that. No, we haven't covered that.
What are other companies thinking about this?
Yeah, what are the companies thinking about it? Yeah, I'm just getting it to here. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've had a lot of conversations this week about carbon dioxide removals. I would say it's becoming more vital for companies to truly show credibility. They've set a plan. The best analogy I've heard is someone said, "Oh, I'm going to run a sub 3-hour marathon." And everyone says, "Oh, that's fantastic. So how's your training going?" And carbon dioxide removals is kind of the same. So you set a net zero plan, but if you don't have readiness for that next stage of truly meeting your net zero commitments, you're essentially setting yourself up to fail. So that's one takeaway that I've heard. And then I would say ultimately there's urgency, but also uncertainty. So companies want to act, but they do still face barriers. Leadership buy-in is a key one. So really, what is that business case? Why spend money today when there may be other decarbonization options that they could apply that capital for? And also navigating the evolving standards. So I work for WBCSD. We co-created the greenhouse gas protocol. I know there's a lot of attention on that. So some companies are essentially waiting until there's clarity on the outcomes of these standard updates. But then I'd say there's positivity too. There's some companies who realize that these updates are going to take years, and they recognize the urgency. So they're acting in any case, which I think is also fantastic. I would say another key thing I've heard this week is the power of collective action. So these companies typically recognize that despite their best efforts, even the largest company, if they achieve net zero, it's great for them, but it doesn't have climatic relevance. So they need to be essentially growing a market where others come in on this. So that's been a theme I've heard from companies that aren't just in the tech sector, but hard to abate and others. They're really seeing that if they work together, small investments today can grow into significant savings in the future as this market grows. So yeah, I would say ultimately internal alignment is a big one, and then the power of collective action, I think, is a key thing that's coming out right now.
And your members, I mean, members within the World Business Council and Sustainable Development who are actually already operating in this field, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So our cohort has some of the biggest procurers on the planet, which is fantastic. And, they've all done it for slightly different reasons, I would say, and their strategies are also different. And what we are able to do is share that with others. So we ran a series of workshops where we are demonstrating what's worked within the boardroom, essentially the why, what, and how of carbon dioxide removals from leading industries, and then sharing that among peers to help, tell that story to their own boards.
So I imagine that there are some areas that are of removals that are currently a little bit more popular than others, or others are kind of more coming along. I mean, direct air capture is expensive, right? But tree planting, if it's done properly, of course, can be less expensive, but very impactful. Are there certain forms of removals that are more attractive right now than others, or others that need more effort, like CCS or something like that?
So I'll say just quickly, we're a strong advocate for a portfolio approach. You'll see this in this guide as well. So this is using nature-based solutions and tech-based solutions. And they provide complementary benefits. So you can get climate impact today while providing catalytic capital to scale future solutions, which ultimately we need on gigaton scales. We're talking about roughly 10 gigatons per year by 2050 of CDR. There are sustainable scaling limits to any of these solutions. There's no one silver bullet that's going to allow this to happen. So we need as much nature as we can. We need as much direct air capture as we can in the right places. We need biochar, enhanced rock weathering. And I would say companies typically look into their value chains and see where there's strategic levers. So I wouldn't say that one company has a particular favorite, but sometimes they might see alignment to a specific methodology that kind of has a better feel for them. So that's one reason sometimes they might dip their toe in that space first, but still looking at a portfolio.
Gabriella?
Well, one thing I've really noticed in our work with the companies is that there's an increasing interest in tying carbon removals into the operations, not necessarily directly doing the removals, but tying the narrative around them into the operation. So making it make sense. There's an example of an insurance company, for example, who wanted to purchase biochar. So biochar is this wonderful stuff where you take offcuts from wood or shells from nuts or husks from rice, any kind of biomass, and you burn it in the absence of oxygen, and that locks up the carbon and turns it into something that looks a little bit like charcoal, hence biochar. And then that can be spread onto fields, and it improves the quality of the soil. It almost acts as a fertilizer. It also locks up the carbon. It was actually invented by Native Americans in the Amazon rainforest, not to solve the climate problem, but to improve the quality of the soil. So this particular insurance company wanted biochar that the origin of the biomass was bamboo. And the reason was that bamboo in this place was an invasive species that was increasing the risk of flooding. And the insurance company insures against the risk of flooding. Equally, the biochar, when it goes on the field, makes the crops more resilient. And they insure against loss of crops. So this is a way that I think, and we mentioned this in the guide as well, when thinking about how to put the portfolio together, it's a portfolio of removals that makes sense for your business, that's relevant to your value chain, that fits in with what you're trying to achieve. So you start to build something that's much more of a business case instead of just philanthropy for it.
Johan?
Yeah, and we need a massive scaling of nature-based carbon removals, but also technical solutions. I think it's a key not to stand sort of put them against each other, because
Right.
we need to scale all solutions. And it's also the reason why we, in the guide, we haven't prescribed in detail. We give guidance, but say that the precise how you build your portfolio, that's something that should develop as a company, and that we don't go down in detail precisely on prescribing A or B or C. We think that is essential. And also, of course, the level of investment. I mean, if you are a consultancy company, you could potentially even invest and sort of counterbalance 100% or even more. We have some companies doing that of your unmitigated emissions, so that's possible. Whereas if you're another type of company, you might need to take approach where you're starting with a couple of percent of the unmitigated emissions. So that's also essential to take into consideration.
I think that the point there is that we talked a lot about this when we were writing and building the guide, that we wanted to make sure that it was helpful and specific, but that it wouldn't be so prescriptive. I think with many of the standards that are being developed, the challenge is that they become so prescriptive, they're very difficult to operationalize and they take a long time to come into effect. So we wanted to put power into the hands of the companies to allow them to do what they're best at, which is understand what's needed, understand the range and the guidelines, if you like, but also the borders, the requirements for integrity, the need for building the industry, and then armed with all of that, then act in a way that makes most sense for their businesses. And we think that's the best way to get this action to grow.
Do you think, I mean, sorry, it's a little bit off script here, but I mean, you talk about the greenhouse gas protocol, that's kind of widely accepted by governments as well, etc. Do you think something like this guide could evolve, not in a restrictive way, you know, like a totally prescriptive thing, but get some kind of welcome support from governments, maybe even at COP30 in Belém? Are you working on those ideas? Or?
So we're working at Rethinking Removals. We work very closely with rule setters across the removal space. And our role has been just to ensure that removals are thought about in the mix, but not as something separate and over there in a corner, but properly integrated as part of an overall climate plan. We've learned over the years that anything where you say it's this versus that usually fails. It has to be a properly integrated overall plan with reductions alongside removals. And so we do a lot of work with the Science Based Targets Initiative. We're working very closely with the International Standards Organization that's building a standard for net zero aligned organizations. And we've been really helping them to bring removals into there. We work with the Oxford Net Zero, of course, who've collaborated with us on this guide, who brought out the Oxford offsetting principles. We work with the Race to Zero, the climate champions from the UN. And for all of those, we're helping make sure that removals fit in with the rest of the climate plan. But we're starting to see what I like to call kind of pre-compliance signals from the future about what governments are going to require about removals. And one of the things that we're trying to achieve with this guide and with our work is to try to make sure they all rhyme. We hear from companies again and again that if we have conflicting rules and it becomes confusing, we're just going to wait. And the one thing we can't afford is to wait. The best time to start working on carbon removals and engaging in it was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So at COP30 in Belém, we'll have the first CDR pavilion, which is, I think, a massive step.
Right.
It'd be worth recognizing that. And yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yep, you'll have the first CDR pavilion. So you'll be inviting governments and private sector and others in to discuss this, and perhaps a guide as well, and how it can go forward. Yeah,
the way that the COPs, these big conferences or the parties that do all the negotiating about the global climate agreement, the way that they work is that they have pavilions where different organizations can engage, and each country usually has a pavilion, and then there's a nature pavilion, there's an oceans pavilion, but there's never been one on carbon removals. It hasn't been seen to be relevant enough. And this year, for the first time, we have. And I think that's really going to make it helpful. A fantastic group of people working on it. It's going to make it helpful to show how removals integrate into the rest.
Thank you. And I just remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, all right.
So it was...
I do that all the time. Don't worry about that.
Easily done. So context from the United Kingdom. Recently, they just released their greenhouse gas gas removal business models. So this is how the UK government sees greenhouse gas removals fitting into a larger growth mandate for the UK. And ultimately, they see it as a true enabler to meet the needs of growth in our country.
Right.
So it's scaling whole new industries, supporting just transition of clean jobs for decades to come. So I would say governments are getting much more serious about this, and Gabriel's already mentioned, but voluntary markets are not big enough for this. Ultimately, we do see it becoming a compliance driver. And there's already signals that that's starting to happen for greenhouse gas removals in many different jurisdictions.
May I just say, just quickly,
Yeah, sure.
so I wanted to ask Johan about this, but so one of the things I've noticed, so I'm very proud of the UK government. It's also announced how it's going to integrate removals into the emissions trading scheme. Japan's already done that, but also governments across the global south are engaging in this. Kenya, Brazil is engaging in carbon removals very strongly in the run up to COP. Germany is making a purchase of carbon removals. You can see even the US has carbon removals still surviving in the policies that are here. So what's interesting here is we had to think very hard when we were writing the guide about how to make it future-proof. So this is voluntary, but we've built into our description of what we think you should do a very keen understanding of the signals that are coming to us from the future about what the compliance is likely to look like to ensure that this approach really stands the test of time. Yes,
Johan?
Yeah, that's right. I think the idea is to look ahead on the standards and the principles. So to as far extent as possible, so that we wouldn't deviate from, well, for the company's perspective, that you can actually start here and then we can adapt the course. You shouldn't wait, of course, for the new standards in order to take action now, but we're as aligned as possible because we're part of the standardization work and with all our people.
Very interesting. Can I add one thing in? We've got more countries now putting down their national climate plans. There were many yesterday, even China with actually an emission reduction target, which was really fantastic to see. And many with all gases now in their new nationally determined contributions. So methane as well, and others. There's a lot of talk about methane. There's going to be a lot of talk about methane at COP30 because, of course, if we can get rid of it very quickly, we might have the emergency brake right now, at least in the short term. Do removals include other gases like the chlorinated, fluorinated gases, which are still stockpiled all around the world and need to be destroyed? Does it include methane, or are we talking just CO2? Sorry, so, maybe a technical question, but I think it's quite important.
Absolutely. So I'll provide some context. For instance, as I said, the UK government has called it greenhouse gas removals rather than carbon dioxide removals in their business plan. And some of the leading companies think of it in the same way. So they are really looking about ways to have, credible, impactful impact today, and potent greenhouse gases are a key element of that. So super pollutants are certainly recognized as another way to, as you say, pull the handbrake.
Right.
WBCSD also partners with the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability, and they have a greenhouse gas removal accelerator. So looking beyond carbon dioxide removals, methane destruction, novel technologies that are going from labs to scale up.
And just one comment. So you use the word super pollutant, and the reason these things are called super pollutants is that they have a much bigger punch when it comes to climate change than carbon dioxide itself. And so if you can remove them, then you have a much more immediate impact. They have a big punch, but they also have short lifetimes.
Yeah, methane's like 80 times CO2, and
but it has a very short lifetime. So but the one thing I'd say is it's not actually a greenhouse gas removal, because typically it's stopping them being emitted into the atmosphere in the first place. So if you have these kind of old refrigerators or air conditioning units, you're stopping the trapped gas from going into the air rather than taking it out of the air. But we are actually looking at things like stacking up. So super pollutants to have an immediate impact now. Then shorter durability removals like nature-based removals to have an impact next, and then investing now in building the capacity for the longer term, longer duration storage for what comes after. And the important thing to emphasize about that is that this is a way to have impact on the climate now in the next 10 years and in the next 20 years. But for all three of those, you need to start committing now. It's not enough to wait.
Right. So we're really coming to the end of the session now. So Johan, I want to turn to you because can you maybe wrap this up for us? Some final remarks on it. I mean, it seems quite exciting, and I didn't realize myself what how much scale of action and thought and whatever is going on this. So it's good news. So please.
I think we have a very important milestone. We developed the guidelines. It's gone in a lot of, as you said, a lot of intelligence and absolute best effort. Now the next step is we will get many more companies start implementing, as we can also create a lot of examples. Any company can of course download and start to work on implementing, following the guide. We will take back feedback, of course, in order to see where we need to tune the guidance over time and potentially complement it with other tools. But I think it's about creating a momentum among the leaders. Stay on course, but that the leading companies and organizations going in the front line and show it's possible, but also to build strong cases. Can we combine carbon removals with adaptation, resilience, and it's a good case for companies, and share that practices between the companies to make it into a strong business case will be very important. And that's very much about leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope that we'll be broadcasting live from Belém over roughly 2 weeks, and be nice to maybe have another go at this subject with some of the companies doing removals and some of the countries, for example, the UK, on where they see it going, and so on and so forth. So I think it's not a one-shot story. This
it's certainly not. It's a living document,
it's a living document.
We want a lot of input for how to use it.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed for being on. We don't have time.
Thank you.
Thank you.